We're live. We've got everybody joining us. From my understanding is we have a global audience for this today. I think it's because we're actually rolling out with a very interesting topic that isn't much explored in wine. So I am Polly Hammond, and on behalf of the Porto Protocol, I welcome all of our attendees who are dropping in the room and our amazing panel today. Today, we're going to be discussing the role of influence. And I specifically want to use the word influence more than perhaps influencers as drivers of climate action in the wine industry. I think that wine has always had a history of influencers, long preceding the world of social media, and understanding what role, what solutions, how can we harness your remarkable communicator skills to drive forward some of the concerns, solutions, and awareness that we all know as actors in the wine industry are so important moving forward. So I'm excited to be doing this because I do partner with the Porto Protocol through my organization, Five Forest, and they charged me with the task of saying what the Porto Protocol means to me. So putting that in my own words, I feel like that we need a community that isn't revolving around certification and perfection, that actually brings a space where all of us, no matter where we are in the process of forward action, can come in and without judgment, share, ask questions, find solutions, find partners, find suppliers, find resources. And sometimes that might be physical resources, but so often that's actually inspiration and education. So for me, when I'm looking at the work that Five Forest does for our clients and ourselves, I know that it can be sometimes quite difficult to know where to go and what to do. And that is the solution that the Porto Protocol has provided for me. And I think that answer will be different for all of us. But so thank you for giving me an opportunity to share that. So now, today, I have an amazing panel. I just want to introduce everyone. I'm going to go on my screen counterclockwise. So I'm going to start with Sophia. Hello. Sophia Longi is a Hi, Sophia.
Hi.
Is a certified wino, writer, teacher, taster, and adventurer, aka Skin and Pulp online. She's the winner of the IWSC Emerging Talent in Wine Communication 2022, and she writes for The Buyer and Wine Searcher, amongst other magazines, other publications. But more than anything, she's got this fabulous line in her bio that I felt like we needed to read to everyone. Everyone should have the chance to enjoy wine, regardless of background, gender, or whether or not they own a pair of red trousers.
Yes.
That made me happy.
Those lovely burgundy red trousers. We love
those
them.
Fabulous red trousers. That's right. Now, continuing around the room, we have Chiara Gianotti. I hope I got that right.
Perfect.
Fabulous. So Chiara is born in Rome. She's got a degree in literature, and she grew up in the world of wine. She's worked actively from a very young age in her family cellars. And with the official diploma of sommelier and the title of Dame de Champagne, since 2015, she's taken her path as a communicator, wine writer, and professional taster. She has a blog, Vino TV, which I understand is much more than a blog, to be fair, gives life to the first web TV dedicated to the world of wine. And you have something very interesting. You are a powerhouse in social media in wine. Vino TV has over 120,000 followers, which in our industry is phenomenal. So I'm excited to talk with you about that. And now, ladies before gentlemen, Jeremy Kuckerman, Master of Wine. Again, I hope I got that right. Thank you so much. I know you've had to squeeze us into your schedule because you are the wine school director at Kedge. You have worked with over 200 winemakers in roles that span the wine industry, from wine merchant to events to consulting. And most recently, you are the co-author of Quel vin pour demain, which is it only in French right now?
For the
Or is
moment,
it-
yes, but it will come in Spanish first, and we hope the English version will come very soon.
Excellent. And so this is a book that specifically focuses on the climate implications, long-term perspectives, and solutions going forward. So the book bio reads, it highlights the actors of the ecological transition in the sector. So thank you so much. I'm grateful to have your very large brain joining us today. So here's where we are. The three of you sit in this wonderful space between the producers who can sometimes live in their producer heads and the consumers who want to know so much about us. And you really bridge that gap in terms of communication, messaging, education, and therefore influence. Today, I would like to hear from the three of you what you've learned about powerful or meaningful green communication in the roles that you have played. So Chiara, I'm going to start with you. With the voice that you have, all of those followers and all of that experience, do you see many producers incorporating their climate change activity into their consumer-facing messaging? And if so, how much?
I think that it's a message that is continuing to grow very much. So much that in some way, for some producer, it's something that it cannot even be separate from the wine production today. So we started some years ago talking about green agriculture, green approach, bio approach to the viticulture. But today it's something that it's really much more. It's grown so much that now it's not only the producer talking about that, but the territory itself that it's bringing up this message. For example, I have some territory of wine production that are really being able to put all the producers together, so as much as they can, of the same area in order to do the biologic district, for example. And I think that it's a very powerful message, that it's not only a war that a single producer is bringing up, but it's something that a territory, an area, a denomination in itself is bringing up, and just really to put the attention on this topic, that it's very, very important, and that it's something that today we are not in the position that we can not taking care about this problem. It's something that everybody must really take very seriously and try all together to do something about that. And I think that the position of the wineries and of the producers and of the denomination themselves, as I said, is today very strong, and it's stronger than stronger every day, much more.
Chiara, I definitely agree with your point about wineries and wine brands don't separate themselves anymore from their position on climate change. And in fact, you have brands that actually build their entire communication around, and their entire brand really, around being climate positive. You have like brands like Sea Change and Hidden Sea, which are all about protecting the ocean. And then the wine is actually secondary to that message. So I think that's just so interesting.
Sophia, do you think that that creates confusion amongst the consumers to understand, well, what is that sweet spot between excellent practices and an excellent product? And, one of the things that we want to talk about it, do any of the certifications or badges or logos or things that we see on those messaging, does that make a difference? Does it stand for something?
Yeah, I think it could kind of cause a little confusion, because you have, I think consumers will go for those brands, so those kind of ocean brands I was talking about, mainly for that reason, not specifically for the wine inside the bottle. I think that it is secondary to them, because as consumers, we align with brands because we want to kind of choose a brand that speaks for our beliefs. So so there's that part of it. And I think in terms of like the logos and stuff, the color green, if you see that color green, it doesn't even matter what the logo is, it doesn't matter what it stands for, it's just a signal to the consumer to be like, okay, green, go, that must be planet friendly in some way.
Right. So Jeremy, in the course of researching for your book, did you find that consumers know or even care around what is so dear to us, these issues of climate change in the wine industry? Is that something that in the course of teaching and education that you're finding is a part of the public discourse at all, or is it just all of us sitting around talking about it?
Well, they definitely care, and they're ready to pay more for cleaner, greener wines. And there's lots of research on that, which is good news because it wasn't the case a few years ago. So I think the awareness is improving every year. But back to what Chiara and Sofia were saying about the producers, we have to bear in mind that the wine industry is very fragmented, that most of the producers are very small. They don't have the means to communicate, most of them, and they don't know to communicate because their main job is to produce wine and good wines. I agree on the fact that some of them do a good job communicating on climate action, especially some of the big ones, some of the big players. So Connoisseur with the Bicicleta range was one of the very first, and that was a very good image and message, I think, giving bicycles to all the employees in the vineyards, and then branding a range called Bicicleta. And then, of course, Torres and Jackson Family Wines, etc. They're doing a great job, but they're pretty big. So they have the means to have employees working on marketing and thinking about the carbon footprint strategy and sustainability strategy, etc. But most of the producers are very small. They often don't know about the best practices and solutions, or they have their own solutions, but they hardly share them with others. Mm-hmm. Which in my view is the biggest challenge when we talk about climate action.
Yeah, so there's actually a term for it. It's called green hushing. So it's the opposite of green washing, where we go out with things that we, maybe are doing questionably, but in green hushing, we're doing great things, but we don't really feel comfortable talking about it. Maybe it's not enough. Maybe we should be doing more. Are we going to be vilified? There are all these reasons that brands themselves might be uncomfortable talking about the awesome steps that they're taking. And actually, that's a really nice segue into how can we leverage communicators like yourself as not just ambassadors of the brand, not just the product and the offering, but literally telling those stories that perhaps we are not big enough or resourced to tell. So Chiara, I'm going to come back to you on this. Do you have you ever had the request? Do you literally have companies coming to you and saying, the goal right now is not going to be talking about what's in the bottle, but instead we want to directly message what we're doing in the supply chain and production anyway, in terms of solutions?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Of course, the most important things for the producers is always what is in the bottle. So the quality is always the first message. But I have a lot of requests to underline and to focus the attention also on what is the involvement of the wineries and of the territory in the sustainability. First of all, for example, I have some clients, some producers that use light bottles, recyclable labels. I work also for the company of the sustainable cork, for example, that is zero footprint, and they want to underline this aspect very much. The producer that use these kinds of tools for their wines. And so I have a lot of requests to focus the attentions also on this point. And on the other hand, as I told you before, I work very much with the consortia, so with the denominations and the territory themselves. And I have a lot of requests of the territory themselves to focus that on their district, there is a lot of wineries involved in this message of the green future and of the attention for the sustainability. So, for example, I don't know, I can do some examples. For example, in the Chianti, there is the Panzano area that is called the Green District, because most of the wineries are completely green. And in the Maremma as well, the Consorzio di Maremma want to underline that in their area there is so much attention from all the producers for the green area, for the sustainability. And I think that this is a very strong point because, as Jeremy was saying, there is also a lot of small wineries that have difficulties on communicate themselves. So spend time and resource to underline that they use, they pay attention to the sustainability. So if they belong to a territory that works on this aspect very much and very powerfully, I think this is a very strong message. And as influencer and communicator, I think we can embrace this kind of message and put them really under the lights of the attentions of the consumers, because some of the consumers, for example, still thinks that a good wine must be in a very heavy bottle, and this is not at all going with the sustainability. So if we are not the first on underline what is better to for the health of the heart, we will never destroy this kinds of mentality on the consumer themselves. And the wineries still use these kinds of bottles sometimes just to put the attention on their wine.
A lot of them do, and I think the consumers are ready to buy wines in light bottles, and there's some good examples. I received recently my allocation from Felton Road, and he's probably the most, or one of the most prestigious and sought after producer in New Zealand, and the bottles are very light, and they're still out of stock every year. So I'm sure everyone's ready. It's just a question of how you educate people and which
exactly. And for example, in Canada, there is the monopoly in Canada that put a maximum of weight of the bottle to enter in the monopoly, and that's a very strong message. On this point.
In Scandinavia, and I agree with you, Chiara. I think it's very important to have collective voices. They're much stronger than when they're individual. Especially in the production part, again, because most of them are very small, and because they don't know to communicate, and it's not their role, and then they need to focus on their vineyard, and they need to fight against climate change as well, which is a big fight and an everyday fight. And then there's the voice taking over and bringing everyone around the table and sharing the best practices, and it will make a change, definitely.
Yeah. And it does have to be about community, I think, and working with each other. I was just reminded then of, so Jancis Robinson has for years written the bottle weights on every bottle that she reviews. And recently there was a petition that came to light only last year, really, and it was calling for all wine producers to put their bottle weights on their tech sheets. But I must say there was a little backlash against some producers feeling very attacked. And it's just, I think some of them were feeling that it would put them under higher scrutiny when they're already under such scrutiny to use organic techniques and everything. So, and I also think that the whole concept of green hushing is just really interesting, the fact that people are staying quiet about the good things that they're doing because they will be held up to even more scrutiny. So it's just a thing where I think communicators and producers and consumers all have to be involved in the conversation equally.
Well, I'm curious about this in terms of the work that you do. So when you're engaging with the brand, are you advising them? Are you saying, you need to consider this? Or do you have an ethical standard of practice around sustainability and climate change actions the same way that you as wine communicators would not communicate around, issues of health that are just a no-go for us? Is it that the communicators, the people who sit in your space, that you are laying down the law, and that affects the messaging that goes from the producers to the consumers? Sophia, I'll let you have a go with that one.
I think it's a really personal thing for the consumer, for the communicator and your personal brand. And it's a stance that you're kind of willing to take. And I think that's a personal choice. But I do think we're at the beginning of something as communicators, and we are becoming more emboldened to be able to say back to the producer, like, this is a great wine, but does it have to be in this heavy bottle? Or have you considered differently, this is a young fruity wine, have you considered bag and box packaging or cans even? So I think the more we're becoming more educated as communicators and as consumers ourselves, to be able to go back to wineries and producers to raise those points, where I don't think we've really been in that position before.
So communicators rely very heavily on trust. In wine, we have such a focus on educating the consumer. So Jeremy, I want to ask you this with your role as an educator. Do you feel like that education is an approach that works with our consumers when we're talking about climate change? Does it need to be emotional? Does it need to be academic? Sort of, how do we take facts and figures that sometimes can be scary and turn that into a positive educational experience for a consumer or for people in the trade who just need to know more and do better?
It's easier for me to answer for the future professionals, because my students are future wine professionals, but they're very receptive to the message. If you want it to work, I believe you need to focus once again on solutions and best practices, because if you tell the people it's going to be a disaster, and I had that big debate with Paul Roca at Vinexposium, because basically he was saying it's a disaster, but I mean climate change is already happening and it's going to be really worse and worse, and what we can do in the wine industry is very little. And to be honest, I was shocked when I heard that, especially because he's general manager of the OIV, so a pretty important institution in the wine trade and in the wine industry. And I think we need to say exactly the opposite. First of all, we need to focus on solutions. We need to tell the people that we can make it, because we can make it. And believe me, I've worked on that book with Michel and Hervé, and the number of solution of inspiring initiatives that we have in the book is amazing. And we could have written 3 or 4 books. So there's a lot of things going on in the wine industry. The main challenge, once again, is to share the knowledge, to bring people around the table, to tell the people in Australia that there's something happening in Chile or something happening in France, which might be a solution or might be something on which they need to work. So we need to focus on the solutions. We need to be very concrete. And the example of the bottle is a good one. I remember, I always take this example, but the champagne AOC went for that lighter bottle, and it was only 65 grams lighter than the previous one. And it represents thousands of cars, the equivalent of thousands of cars emissions of CO2 per year. So that's pretty huge. And it was just one solution and only 65 grams. So these are the things we need to tell the people. I also talked recently about bulk shipping, and I had in front of me an audience of producers. So probably the vocabulary I used was not the right one, because I used bulk shipping while I should have said bottling at destination. Which is probably very different, because when you say bulk shipping, you think about bulk wine, which is linked to a bad image and low quality. But nowadays, technically, we have it's easier to have a stable wine at destination shipped in bulk than shipped in bottle. Mm-hmm. And this is something we need to share with the producers, because of the bad image of bulk wine, they're not ready to go for that, especially the good ones. But I think that would be a big part of the solution as well. So these are the things you need to say. And also, you need to make the student work on very concrete cases. So what we do at Cage, for instance, is we, in one of my programs, we ask them to work on green projects. And they need to develop a business plan and to think about sustainable solutions for the wine or the hospitality industry. And then they present their project in front of a jury, and then they're highly involved, and sometimes the ideas are very inspiring. And then when you do that, you really prepare them to think differently, to change their mind. And this is how we're going to have more sustainable, more flexible, and more responsible producers and professionals in the future.
Awesome. So an interesting thing that I noticed in this category of moving the bar forward, Leonardo DiCaprio has just become a stakeholder in Champagne Telmont. And of course, he is one of the most well-known client activists. And we've seen a history of celebrity endorsements in wine. Is this the kind of thing where having him on board can actually move really big change? Like, are we looking at something as simple as we need celebrity endorsement for wine and climate change solution? I know that sounds simple, and I know that's the purview of big money, but who are the voices that can move this forward?
It depends.
Go for it.
It depends on what he will do at Telmont Champagne. I mean, if there's a big change, obviously he's a voice, and there's lots of people listening. But then we need to see what he's gonna do, and whether it will make a change. If it's the case, and then he communicates on it, then yes, he's gonna be a big influencer, and it's gonna be very inspiring for the people.
Yeah, I think it's because I understood that they were already practicing organically and all of that first, and because he loved what they were doing, then he is backing it or becoming an investor and an endorser.
Correct.
I mean, I think the voice has to be genuine, so he has to be authentic, and he's spoken out about this stuff before, but also it is about raising the profile. So lots of people wouldn't have heard of that champagne before he's come on board. So it's about raising the profile and someone being able to tell those stories. And I think that's what consumers connect with, is stories. And if he can do that, then great. But then on the other side of the coin, you had Cameron Diaz with her clean wine stuff. And that's very confusing for the consumer, because does that mean we've all been drinking unclean wine before that? And what is clean wine? Is it organic? But is it sustainable? So it has to come from a place of authenticity and clarity in their messaging.
Yes,
So-
I think that the most important thing is, first of all, to have clear messages, and also go step by step, because the consumers as well as the producers have an idea of very traditional things of the wine business that are very difficult also to change, to move on another way. So we also have to do the things a little bit step by step. Of course, a big personality who bring a message is always something that a lot of people will follow. But we have to be careful, because otherwise the fact is that we can move too fast in a way that producers cannot follow so easily, because I think we have to bring them little by little to move towards a direction. And for example, it could be very helpful, first of all, to have certification more defined all over the world. So have some protocols that we can really spread with an idea of what is healthy, what is not, what we can do on the approach on the vineyards, on the cellars, on the bottling. So have protocols with the clearest certification. I think it could be very important as a message to bring powerfully going on.
Right. Continue, Jeremy. Forgive me.
I agree, Chiara, on the fact that every step is important and everyone is not ready to take a big step quickly. Some people are, but every change is still a change, and bringing the people around the table and making them change their practices is even though they don't change everything immediately. And it doesn't look so sustainable for them to go greener and to push the green button a lot directly. It's still a step, and sometimes it's gradual for certain producers, sometimes it's not. I realized, Polly, that we didn't answer on your standards of communication question. So first of all, I think we can speak about health, and we can speak about anything, because you mentioned the health issues, and I think we can discuss the health issues in the wine industry. Depends on how you discuss the topic. But in my view, when it comes to climate action, I'm not sure that having standards as there's lots of ways to speak about it, and there's lots of means, and so if we go for a lexicon or for something that is too strict, it might not help. So if we try to set standards, they need to be very flexible.
Do you think this is something, just kind of returning to what Sophia said, that each actor makes the decision themselves? So as a marketer, we have a policy that we abide by a set of ethical marketing tenets that are published, that are online. And that's really important to us because we know that we are marketing alcohol. But that's my decision. That's not something that's imposed upon me. Is it the same thing where I actually put a link as we were talking about this? There's a whole category of influencers in the fashion world who are sustainable influencers, who are talking about the detrimental effects of fast fashion and what the alternatives to it are. And there's even an influencer body in the UK that specifically represents them and aligns them with brands. So what I'm thinking is there a space in wine for this kind of communicator? We've got our tasters, and we've got our tourism, and we've got our hospitality. do we actually need the communicator where they have built their brand on sharing these stories of great sustainability solutions? And I know this is really what the Porto Protocol is, but I'm thinking about individuals, not collectives.
I'm sure we're going to see even more. I'm sure we're going to see more of that. And yeah, communicators, like you say, building their brand around being climate activists, and kind of wine is very much integrated into that. Like, for example, like the vegan chef movement. So you have chefs who they base their brand around being a vegan chef. So I'm sure people will base their brand around being a climate activist wine person, you know? So yeah, there's definitely room for that.
So I have a question for all three of you, just to jump in very quickly on the topic of metrics. So my experience is a lot of brands, they really love the shiny thing, the vanity, like endorphin rush of metrics. Is there a way that we can actually, as communicators, as influencers, as the person who sits between the consumer and the producers, use metrics to go back to producers and say, do you know, every time we talk about your climate change solutions, or every time we talk about your soil practices, we see spikes in interest and engagement. Can we actually use numbers to encourage them to communicate better? So, Chiara.
It could be a very good idea. Of course, we need to have research on numbers and on metrics on that. So, first of all, we are the first that we will keep an eye and attention on seeing if we can develop these kinds of info in order to inform the wineries. I think that anyway, there is a lot of attention of the consumer. So anyway, I can also say, without studying the meters, that I can say that there is a lot of attention of the consumer on these kinds of topics. And it depends also the way that you put the lights on that. So if you put a message in a way that it's interesting for the consumers, because anyway you are telling a story, a case history as well, or anyway bringing the wineries together with its land, its territory, and the attention the winery puts on the territory. These are all tools that works very, very well. Even not trying to force the message, I think it's a message that has a very good appeal on the consumer. So honestly, I often put the attention on my message on the relationship between what the winery does for paying attention to its terroir, for the climate changes, and for the sustainability. So I think it's a message that already has a very strong power, and we can absolutely, as an influencer, trying to underline this to the winery when we talk about them, underlining that it's a strong message that consumers are happy to receive. Another thing that I can say is that in the last years, there are also some influencer wine writers, also some wine guide that have put the attention on these kinds of sustainability. For example, there are guides that are focused only on the organic winery, with the research of the best wineries that are involved on the message of the environment. Also, there are guides that inside, for example, they put the point to the wine, but they also put, for example, a green leaf, where there are the wineries that are focused on the sustainability, or wines that are green. Lines of there are producers that have their own line dedicated only to the green wines, so where they have the practice of sustainability. So I think it's a message that is working very well. What we have to be careful is not to put the message as something that it's a fashion message, that you can talk about this just because it works. No, the wineries have to be really involved on that. And then it's our ability on bringing the right message for the consumers. But first of all, the winery have to be involved really on that and put passion on the environment, sustainability, more than believe that it's a strong message and that's it.
Sure.
Back to the metrics, Polly, I believe we start to have some metrics. I was speaking about the willingness to pay more, which is something that is starting to be quantified. We've seen several research on profitability of organic or biodynamic estates. We've had also some research that came out on scores, and I think I saw 15,000 scores that were analyzed over years, and from Wine Spectator, from Béthane de Sauve, etc. And on average, the organic and biodynamic wines were scored significantly higher than the others, and these wines were tasted blind. So these are things we can use already. And on the marketing aspect, I'm sure some metrics will come out in the future. I hope so, but there's no point not working on it. Definitely. And for the messages, Kia was speaking a lot about the vineyard, which is a big part, but I think we also need to focus on very simple messages, such as, for instance, the distribution strategy, because we all know that on the carbon footprint of wine is the two biggest costs are the transport and bottles and packaging, and basically just telling the producers, especially the prestigious one, that they should sell less wines far away from their country, and that people should taste in priority wines that are produced in neighbor countries or regions, is a very simple message, and this will make a big change.
We might get some pushback on that one. Jeremy, I have a question for you as the MW in the room. In wine communication and in wine drinking and in aspirational marketing, there's such a love affair with the romantic ideal of wine, which often is not actually direct in line with most sustainable practices. So how do we shift some of that romanticism down to the practicalities of changes that we make in the vineyard and in the winery to be more sustainable, to have better, or to have a lesser impact? How can we shift what the public loves about our product?
Actually, I think you can be very romantic and very classic and still be very sustainable. I think lots of habits, practices, traditional practices were very sustainable, and we need to bear in mind that it's the Industrial Revolution that that created all the problems we live to today. So before the Industrial Revolution, the viticulture was much greener and much cleaner than nowadays.
Yeah. And foot treading. What's more romantic than treading grapes with bare feet?
Yeah, and also if you think about very classic things such as bottles and corks, and cork means cork forest, means CO2 sequestration, etc., etc. So you can have clear messages on very classic and romantic things in the wine industry.
Yeah. I think as well, you were talking about like local wine and stuff, and actually especially during the pandemic, and it locked down and we had to really think about places to meet up outside, there was a real resurgence of visiting English vineyards, and lots of clever vineyards were creating picnic in the vines packages, and I just thought that was just fantastic. And of course, your carbon footprint as a consumer, if you're buying wine down the road in Kent, then it shrinks, and that connection between the bottle and the vine just strengthens. And I think there was a real understanding of that that came out of 2020, actually.
All right.
For example, as Jeremy was mentioning, that of course the fact that a bottle of wine from Italy, for example, is consumed in Australia, this transport is very problematic for the environment. No, what we can do also as influencer, and that it's what we are doing effectively in some of the, especially in Italy and in all the other countries, to talk also not only with the wineries, but most of all with the consumer, to educate the consumer to embrace what is the local wines to consume. So to understand that he must be proud of the wines that he has in his country, in his region as well. For example, in Italy, we are very stronger with the consumer. Most of the region drink their own wines of the region, and it can be a little bit close mind. It looks like a closed mind, but in reality, it's something very good for the environment if we teach to the consumer to be happy of what he can really find in its
a movement that we
country.
see. We see this in food all the time, the eat local, the understanding of seasonality. Like, we've all been onboarded to this in our food consumption. So it's just embracing it.
0 kilometers menu, etc.
Exactly.
We should do the same. And it's not only the consumers, it's also the distributors. It's wine shops, it's the restaurants, etc. They can focus on concepts of wines based nearby, and it will work. The message is very easy to. Yeah.
Well, I think I was just going to say, a difficult thing that I've found when I've been doing masterclasses and things, and I talk about English wine, is the price. You do pay a premium actually to drink English wine at the moment. But when you sell the dream and say, well, actually, you are helping the environment, you're being kinder to the planet if you do shop more locally, people do. They are prepared to pay more a lot of the time because they feel like they're putting their money in something that they believe in.
Right.
Also, I'm thinking, Sophia, it's obviously we need to stay realistic, and English people won't drink only English wines because
not only English wines, no.
But if I remember well, the first country sold in UK is Australia. So I mean, that's
you can't get any further away than that.
So you can come to Italy.
Lovely wines far closer than Australia. So that's an important message to consumers, I think.
I want to jump in. We've got a handful of minutes before we're going to take questions from any of the audience. I think that the one thing we haven't touched upon, which for me is kind of like the elephant in the room, is wine tourism. Wine tourism, it does have an impact on climate. It is vital for so many of our wineries, big and small. How can we bridge that sort of aspirational gap? How can we make it possible as communicators that someone can get as much of the feel-good experience that wine tourism allows for them without, for many of them, you think Australia to the UK, that's 28 hours of flying. I think that I've done that. It's doozy. How can we actually serve both sides of that equation better through what we do? So, Sophia, we're going to start with you. We're going to go around and then we're going to pass it to the audience.
It's a really difficult one because, of course, you can be doing all these amazing initiatives like farming organically and buying lighter packaging, but flying is the worst culprit, isn't it? When we're talking about planet health. So I guess if people are going to be touring vineyards, and we all love it, it would be encouraging them to buy from the vineyard that they're going to. So at least they're buying locally to that vineyard rather than shipping the wine across the world after that. Virtual tours, I know they don't sound as romantic as actually being there, but there's some fantastic companies like Vivant, for example, that they've invested in, and it's not just Zoom technology, it's like this amazing interface, and you can do some amazing virtual events. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't say any more than that at the moment because I'm actually in Italy at the moment. So,
Chiara, you have a multimedia platform. Tell us, how can we use all of those channels at our disposal to maybe give them that awesome experience without them having to fly?
Well, for me, it's much more easier because I live in a country that it's full of winery. Just you cannot go by foot, but for example, there are a lot of program with visiting wineries by bicycle, with the mountain bike tour, a horse tour, or even there are with the green car that stop for the electric cars, so improving these kinds of car instead of the others. It's in Italy, and I think that also with the lockdown, we have put a very strong way on that, because before, Italian people as well were used to go with the plane and go in other holidays abroad. We discovered again our country just near our home. Mm-hmm. So with the few hours of car, you go in fantastic places, and this is a message that in Italy we are trying to focus very strong, so that you can really enjoy the enoturism in your own region, not even in the country, but also in your own region. So really moving as little as much, really few kilometers. And but we are lucky because we have a country full of wineries, and every region has full of winery to visit. So the message here in Italy is very strong on that way. But of course, for the countries that doesn't have these kinds of richness, it's a little bit more difficult,
more challenging. Jeremy, thoughts?
I think there's a negative aspect of wine tourism, which is pretty obvious because you need to travel to the wineries. But there's also a very positive one. It's a very effective education tool to have the people on sites. You can show them the best practices, you can discuss, you can debate, you can change the minds of the consumers when you have them coming at the winery as well. So there's both aspects, a negative one and a positive one.
You just have to make certain you have the positive one. So I think the takeaway from that is, if you have an international wine tourism program, make certain that you're educating them while they're there.
Exactly. If you have lots of people coming on site, then you need to change their minds and to do something with it. That's for sure. Again, we need to be realistic. And then if you're in Scandinavia and you love wine, you need to travel, and you have the right to sometimes employ a winery. Yet, maybe you can go not that often in Australia or New Zealand,
Right.
and more often in Europe, for instance. And again, it's a question of trying to set an example. For instance, at the Cage Wine School, we organized some field trips for the students, and we used not to think about anything, to be honest, like everyone. So we were just looking at destinations and thinking, okay, this is great, let's go there. The wineries are wonderful. We're going to have fun and meet lovely producers. And since a few years, we looked at the European map, and we said, okay, we have 6 programs. It represents 6 trips by plane. Let's go only for 2. And
Right.
this is what we do now. And actually, you have lovely destinations, and we still bring them to Rioja and to that lovely place and to Germany, etc. And yeah, these are very simple things you can decide to do. And when you do so and you communicate on it, people think differently.
Think differently. All right. So we have just a handful of questions that we're going to go through. Thanks to everyone who's bearing with me if I run a little bit late on this. Okay. So some of the questions, I'll throw this out to everyone. Do you believe that the fragmentation of definitions of sustainability, clean wine, and natural wine cause a high level of confusion to the trade and amongst consumers? So do we have a language problem? Sophia, I'm going to direct that to you.
There is a language problem, but all of those things do mean different things. So natural wine is different to like they're not all sustainable wines, and the other way around as well. So it's I think Chiara earlier was talking about kind of standardization and perhaps like certain logos that are standardized over different bottles. So, I mean, yeah, I think logos are a good way of kind of recognizing something straight away. But there just needs to be more education on those terms. Those terms aren't going to go away, but there needs to be more awareness and education on what they are.
Right. All right. Next up is part of the solution to offer choice. So I'm assuming this means that a producer offers the consumer choice, a lighter bottle, reusing the bottle, using corks, cans, Tetra Paks, awareness and a collective voice of using a method as opposed to one method. So bearing in mind cost, requirements, regulations. Jeremy, we'll direct this one to you. Do you think that a single producer can offer choice?
I'm happy to take that one because I've got a very concrete example. In Bordeaux, the Grand Cru Classé, they sell almost all their wines, if not all their wines, in wooden cases. While lots of producers will buy one bottle in a shop and the shop don't care about the wooden case. So simply asking the distributors or the consumers or whatever, sorry.
Okay.
But simply asking the clients whether they want wooden case or cardboard case would make a big change, because I'm sure that a lot of them would say, I don't care about the wooden box, which is much heavier and has a much higher carbon footprint.
It's the equivalent to asking a retail shop, do you want a bag? You know, like how often do we just say no?
Yeah, exactly. If you don't ask the consumers, you don't know. So that's sorry.
That's okay. All right. Last one comes back to romanticism. Chiara, we're going to direct this to you. Can you go on a romantic date with a bag and box, a paper bottle, a plastic bottle? You know, can we make alternative packaging feel romantic the way a bottle does?
That's what we said at the beginning. It's a matter of going step by step. We can absolutely go there in that direction. We just have to, first of all, to take away the prejudice, because why a can is less romantic than a bottle if you are with the right man in front of you. So today, most of the consumer would be absolutely afraid about this idea. And I can speak about myself that, for example, I work with, as I told before, with the sustainable cork instead of the natural cork. And this is, for example, something that in Italy, the consumer, many consumers are not even ready about the screw cap or the nature of or anything that is not natural cork. I've done also something with the can, with the wine in can, and my consumer were like, Chiara, no, you cannot speak about wine in can. So there is a lot of prejudice. We have to go slowly, but we have to make people understand that quality is something, packaging and tradition and sustainability is something else. And step by step, we can go in that direction. And one way, for example, in there are countries that are ready for that. In Sweden, the bag-in-box, it's absolutely welcome.
Right.
I think that it's for a good romantic picnic, for example, in a green park. It's the perfect.
I think it's up to us as communicators and as marketers to create those images. It's all about good marketing.
Make it romantic.
Yeah,
and
that's your job.
For example, when I spoke in my blog for the can, for example, I was drinking the wine in can when I was in the boat on the sea with the boat, and I was with the wine in can because it's better than a bottle of glass. It's safer in everything, no? It's lighter, it's safer. So
for the moment, technically speaking, most of the alternative packaging do not offer the same quality and aging potential.
Absolutely.
Than glass bottles. And if we want to fight against climate change, it's also about how we consume, and consuming less but better is also a very important message. So I'm not sure that alternative.
Actually, can I come in? You
got 1 minute, and then I have to wrap this up. I'm getting the flag on the side.
Just quickly about that point you said about aging, 95% of wines made today are made to be drunk young. So for young, fresh, fruity wines, cans, boxes are perfect for them. So we've aged wines, like 5% of wines that are made today. And I think we have to get our heads around that not all wines are meant to be aged.
That's part of the challenge, to educate people to age the wine again, to be ready to pay enough so that producers can be sustainable, etc., etc. So that's the challenge.
And reuse your bottles is coming from the side. I want to thank everyone. I think that this is a perfect example of we've gone through so much. We came in with good questions, and by the time we all get going on it, we now have 3 or 4 more podcasts that we could, or webinars that we could all sit here and discuss, from pricing to romanticism to the real impact of drinking better. So to the panelists today, I very much want to say thank you. To the attendees who've stuck with us, I know we've gone over time a little bit. Thank you very much. And especially to the team at the Porto Protocol for giving us a voice to have this conversation. Thank you. I do want to remind everyone that this conversation was streamed live on YouTube and will be available for, if you want to mention it, if you as communicators want to mention it in your own public setting, please feel free to link back to the YouTube clip so that all of your audience can see it and get on board too. And to anyone who came in late in the audience or would like a little bit of a follow-up, you can find us on YouTube, and it will also be on the Porto Protocol website and the podcast. I'm forgetting the podcast. So we are streamed wherever you listen to your pods. And with that, thank you all so much. I look forward to seeing you again.
You.
Thank you.